Okay, we are live. Welcome everybody to Building the Black Educator Pipeline. I am so excited to be here. Let me give the disclaimer first. This will be my first live stream podcast, and I'm just grateful for the opportunity. But yes, bear with me, people, as we go through this. So I am Shayna Tarell. I am the Director of Pipeline Programming at the Center for Black Educator Development. I myself am an educator activist hailing from New York. My CEO, Sharif El-Mekki, going to be mad that I shouted my people out. South Bronx. Yeah, we in the house. But but I am here by way of Temple University in Philadelphia. That's how I migrated from New York to Philly. But I'm an educator activist, spending most of my life at this point, almost 20 years dedicated to at-risk youth and fighting for justice in my community. So that's who I am. So I want to talk a little bit about why we decided to kind of launch this podcast, Building the Black Educator Pipeline, and why we do this work. And this is for folks who are aware and who aren't aware about what's really happening in our country in terms of teacher education and the teacher profession. Right now, if I just use Pennsylvania just as a prime example, the teaching force is 96% white. Why is that problematic, you ask? Because when you talk about the benefits of children having people who look like them in the classroom and what that means to them. So just to drop, a few data points on that. For Black kids, having at least one Black teacher in 3rd through 5th grade, the probability of them dropping out of school reduces by 29%. And for low-income Black boys, the results are even greater. That result falls by 39%. And when Black students have at least 2 Black elementary school teachers, they are likely, 29% more likely to roll into college. So the benefits of race matching and having people in the classroom that look like you, especially for Black teachers, especially for Black students, is enormous. Another reason why we do this work and why we wanted to do this show, because we really wanted to highlight and really lift up the voices of the folks who are in the work and folks who are trying to get into work, and really build a collective group of unison voices to talk about what the need is and how do we really work together to build the Black educator pipeline. Some other data points, if we talk about specifically about teachers who are currently in the teaching profession, 52% of teachers feel like they are unprepared to deliver instruction. Another 72% feel like they're unprepared to work in urban classrooms. And another 62% just feel like culturally relevant, diverse, they're not prepared to teach culturally relevant or diverse students, which again, that in itself is problematic. So that's really why we're invested in this and doing this work. But we all know education and being a teacher is one of the most revolutionary acts. It's a form of protest. We are in a social justice fights when we are in schools and we are teaching. So I would love to thank the Center for Black Educator Development for giving me this opportunity to launch this podcast, and also shout out to Citizens Ed for giving us the opportunity to be on their platform. So who do I work for, right? Who is the Center for Black Educator Development? What are we? Right now, we are invested in building a Black teacher pipeline. We are super invested in that. And we're building our Black teacher pipeline and really working to diversify the teacher pipeline. And we do that in 4 ways: strengthening pathways to teaching, developing culturally responsive pedagogy, innovating professional learning, advocating for critical public policy. So that's just the 4 main pillars that we work off as an organization to really invest in the Black teacher pipeline. Today, we had a media release where we were talking about our actual initiative, the Black Teacher Pipeline, where we're getting some funding from a couple people to support our pipeline. Our main funder, the Lauder Foundation, shout out to them. So what we really want to do here with the Black Teacher Pipeline is what we call the 4-4-4 model. So with the 4-4-4 model, it's really a 12-year pipeline program that we're trying to build. So inspiring and recruiting students all 4 years through all 4 years of their high school experience, Also, they're all 4 years of their college experience. And then when they get into the teaching profession, supporting them. So really a strong to and through model into the teaching pathway in the profession. And then we're also trying to launch a fellowship in partnership with UNCF that will be helping us with scholarship money to alleviate some of those financial barriers for students. So all of our work, all of this work is really going into the Black teacher pipeline, and we can't do it without the support of you guys out there right now supporting and watching this show, and helping us build a collective voice in what's going on out here with building the Black educator pipeline. So today's show, so it is Black History Month, y'all. So we couldn't launch the show off without real Black history and talking about how that fits into building an educator pipeline. So today's show is titled Sankofa and the Black Teacher Pipeline. We're going to be talking about the history of Black educators and shaping the future. So I am so honored to have this man as my first guest. He is a mentor to me, and he's just been very integral in my life. I've been a part of the Philadelphia Freedom Schools movement probably since I got here to Philadelphia. But prior to that, I was a part of the national movement with Children's Defense Fund from when I was a teenager, and working at Harlem Children's Zone. So I have deep roots in the Freedom Schools movement. But Dr. Carr has been a mentor, a mover, a shaker, and a great example for me of what it really means to be an educator activist. And with that, let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Carr. So Dr. Carr is an expert in the legacy of Black education. He's also the co-founder of Philadelphia Freedom Schools. He was an integral part in establishing that here in Philadelphia. He currently serves as an associate professor of African American Studies and adjunct at Howard University Law. He is a department chair of African Studies at Howard University. Dr. Carr led the creation of African American history curriculum that's now required in all Philadelphia youth schools in the public school system. He also served as the city of Philadelphia's first resident scholar of race and culture in 1999. Okay, Dr. Carr has dedicated his career to Black history and education through scholarly work. So lecturing around the world. Okay, my man is international, y'all, and media features with places like BBC, NPR, and CNN. So I would like to welcome to the show my Baba, my mentor, my guy, Dr. Greg Carr. Welcome, Dr. Carr.
I'm so glad to be here. Dear Sister Shayna, we have been rolling for a long time. This is a exciting new avenue, new pathway. Congratulations. I'm honored to be here in this space.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh. You're doing it like you've been doing it forever though, so it's all good.
Nah, first time, but we got to be live. We got to give the people what they want, brother. So we out here.
Yeah, the people need. Not to give them what they want.
But give them what they need, okay?
Yes. Oh, now.
So Dr. Carr, I want to launch our conversation off by really talking about the Black educator pipeline and how it relates to Black history.
Yes.
So we know, like, our people, like, we some learning and some teaching people, right? Like, that's in our culture. That's in our DNA. But what you will learn, right, counter to that, right, like being indoctrinated into America, it treats education like it's something foreign to Black folks. Like when Black folks indulge in educational behavior or excel at education, like they're the exception. But like, in fact, that's like who we are, right? Like we are this as a people.
That's right.
So I want to launch this show off by talking about like true Sankofa moments. Like, so really, like, from your perspective, how do you think our ancestors identified a teaching community or teachers in the community? Like, what kind of rituals were involved in that process?
Oh, wow. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, I thought I had a little feet. I put the headphone just to make sure. But yeah, no, I mean, I'll keep it very short. Over half of what we know as recorded human history takes place in Africa before anywhere else. And of course, if you go back the millions of years for the development of the species, and in the last 250,000 years in terms of development of Homo sapiens, that's almost entirely an African story. So when we say the first teachers in human development were Africans, well, yeah, that's true. They wouldn't have called themselves Africans because it's the only reality they knew. So we have, as members of the human family who are the parents, literally, of everyone else, we have made the most mistakes. We have learned the most lessons. We have made and had an outsized share of the greatest triumphs and breakthroughs in terms of how to pass on information on. As one of my jegnas and one of our great teachers, the great John Henry Clark, used to say, how to stay on this earth. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be, period? That's all human beings are trying to, figure out from breath to breath. And education is the process of not only learning and exploring for oneself and one's community, but passing on that information to the future through the children, through the next generations. And so we've made those discoveries longer than anybody else on the planet, and laid the foundation really for the way everybody else does it. And so how you identify teachers, I think, the first teacher obviously is the family. The first teachers are the family. And of course, in the family, the first teachers are the mothers. You know this as a mother yourself. And, that teaching begins, of course, before we ever leave your wombs. And so once we make it here, the education process begins in its next phase. And children learn by what they see and what they experience. And so when you see, and now fast forward to recorded memory, where we have a substantial amount of information, those large social formations that we typically refer to as civilization, the records that we have today, and every day we make new breakthroughs, scholars make more discoveries, but there are watershed moments in human development. And just to refer to one of the African ones, one of the oldest in human history in terms of recorded memory, the Egyptian, the Kemetic, which served as the foundation for, as we kind of began to take our lap with Philadelphia Freedom Schools, in the long tradition of freedom schools in Philadelphia, Liberation Academy, the Freedom Day School, John Churchville, going back to the early 19th century with the Institute for Colored Youth, which is now Cheney, and going back even further. I mean, as we took our lap, we drew upon those Egyptian concepts. And so I'll keep this very brief. I just mentioned a couple. One of the words for education and teaching in ancient Egyptian is seba, or sebait. Sebait means teaching. And if you see it in the hieroglyphs, you can see it drawn with a star, and you can see it drawn with a human being with a kind of instructive rod in the hand. And both of those things communicate the nature of education. One is to illuminate, literally to shine a light on, to help people recognize things, to help people understand things. And then the other crucial part, when you see that determinative of a person, you need an elder. You need someone who has some content knowledge, some capacity to acquire content knowledge and help other people acquire it, help students acquire it. So what we center this African learning practice in the fact that we honor, respect, and listen to instruction from those who have some content mastery. In the 21st century, that would mean some math. If you're a math teacher, you should know some mathematics. You shouldn't be teaching something you don't know. And so that's important in terms of teacher training, what you're doing. When you think about any area of life activity, that is the case. And so with that in mind, we follow that teaching and learning process, which is designed to build community, to help everyone understand that everyone can and must learn, because we're all members of the community, and we must all contribute. And then finally, there's a phrase in ancient Egyptian in a book called the Book of Ptah-hotep. That's what we call it now. And in that instruction, there's a phrase where Ptah-hotep asks the government, "May I be allowed to make a speech of old age?" And what he's really saying is the word speech of old age, which is Medu Yawu, that literally translates as speech of old age. But what he's really asking is, may I be allowed, now that I've acquired this knowledge, to train my replacement? That, to me, is a much more broad and important definition of education. The purpose of an educator is to train our replacements, because we're not going to be here. So our job is to speak to the future through the children, and then to get out of their way. Why? Because soon they will grow into that process, and they'll have to train their replacements. If an educator isn't thinking about that in that way, if you think about this as other people's children, or we don't know about this community, well, guess what? You've just put a knife to the throat of your society, because you don't see that child as your replacement. You see it as somebody else's problem. Oh, can't hear you. Is that me?
Is it me or is it you? Can you hear me?
You good? I can hear you now. Oh, yeah.
I was going to say some of the points that you made are remarkable and interesting. In the fact that being a teacher, the way we're talking about it in ancient times, again, it's a way of life. It's
Yes.
not a job, right? It's not something separate or something you apply for, or something you do. It's literally the way of life. So then even how we're speaking about training our replacements, again, that's a way of life. You pass down knowledge to your young so that they can carry on the traditions, right, of the culture.
That's right.
So, so then integrating that and infusing that, right? We all know, like, as time has evolved, we know what they do to our communities, right? We know what they do to our traditions. Um, what
Yeah.
in ancient times would, so us being in existence as teachers, right? So my real question is, what in ancient times would kind of elevate somebody or lift somebody up as being the grand teacher or the teacher, right? So if I'm a kid and I'm exceptional at math in ancient times, or I'm exceptional at reading, what would the elder do to pick you out to say, like, you are going to be my master's study? Were there any rituals that existed then? Because I feel like
Oh,
what we're
oh yeah.
lacking and definitely missing now, we don't have people tapping our young people on the shoulder to say, come with me, join this movement. I see something
Yes.
in you.
Yes. Yes. Well, I mean, I think you've really outlined part of the process. The first thing is you have to know the children.
Mm-hmm.
It's much easier when they're a member of your family or your village or your smaller community. You kind of know the children and you can identify the gifts. In the society we live in now, if you're a teacher in a classroom, you don't know the children, you might not be able to recognize the gifts. You might not be able to recognize, and there's a lot of folks, writing about learning styles and all this kind of, and that's fine. I mean, that scholarship is important. But, I say this often when I work directly for the school district in all the years since I've worked with K-12 folk, the teachers I've learned the most from in many ways are elementary school teachers. The master elementary school teachers can see very early on where a child's aptitudes are and gifts are, and they can identify her and say, or identify him, identify them and say, I see you over there, and then help encourage them to get those broad kind of skills. But traditionally it's different. There are a couple of pathways. One is the bloodline, for good, bad, or indifferent. In other words, if you come from a family of teachers, if you come from a family who has this kind of occupation, you're expected to be in it. I'll use a quick example from West Africa, the country now of Mali, the city of Timbuktu. One of the traditions that you have, this is known as a center of learning in the ancient world, the medieval world. Those who were tasked with being scholars, writers, keepers of the written word, in some ways, those who pass on the information. We'd say librarians now, but their word is much too small. When a child is born in a family of librarians, for example, they are delivered, they come out of their mother's womb, and they are immediately have their face covered with cloth or some, covering that will bring them into a space, or bring books into where they are, or bring them into the space with books, and then lift the cloth. So that the first thing they see on the planet is the thing they will be responsible for. And their training literally begins at birth, but they're expected to do that because they came out of a family of people who would do this. So they don't really have a choice in the matter. The other way to do it is to identify the aptitude in children, regardless of bloodline. And if we look at the ancient Egyptians, for example, we really don't know who could or could not write in Egyptian society. People say, well, writing was an elite practice. It was the royal family, or was I've gone many times now, probably 11, 12 times, to a place called Set Ma'at, the place of Ma'at. It's known as Dira Medina in the Arabic. It is the village where those who worked on the tombs and temples lived, where they wrote the hieroglyphs in the temples. You think of Tutankhamun, so-called King Tut, Amenhotep, all these people, Hatshepsut. In that village, people could write, and they didn't come from families who were royal. They didn't come from, so what you see is there's a literate culture in the Nile Valley for thousands of years, several thousand years, of people who are identified by their talents. So the only thing I would say is, in terms of rituals for identifying, you've got to observe children. If you're a teacher, and it's not just elementary schools or middle school teachers, it's high school teachers, it's college teachers, it's people who are working in community centers. When you see someone with an aptitude, You help nurture them, which requires you to have the content to help lead them into developing that talent, or you being part of a network so that you know who you need to guide them to.
But see, Baba, you draw on a very important point when we're even talking about rituals and we talking about talent, right? And all that stuff. What we can learn from our ancestors is community and community investment in children and in youth, right? So
Absolutely.
that's exactly what I'm hearing you say. Like, what can we learn? Oh, community and then investment and investment in your children so that you can invest in your future. That is exactly what I'm hearing you say.
Yes. Yes.
Because, and the reason why some of the work we're doing in elevating the voices for building a Black educator pipeline is so important, because who knows more about our people or about our children than ourselves?
That's
How
right.
can somebody foreign or somebody who's not in the mix of where we live, what we do, how we know culturally, really know my child, right? And
That's
then
right.
even the integration process of being in our community takes long hours of training and community building. But
That's
if
right.
people from within the community identify the talents of the children, or identify like, hey, I'm going to invest in you so you can take this path or take this road, I think that's super important. But I
That's
also think that hearing everything you're saying, folks need to take from this community and investment in the
oh,
youth. That's the
absolutely.
only way, especially in this space, that we're going to build the next Black educator pipeline with
That's right.
strength. So
That's
I'm
right.
definitely hearing that out of the conversation.
That's
And even what you're saying about thinking about these gifts of exceptionality, right? Like only the royals can write. Untrue.
that's right.
Untrue.
That's
What
right.
happens a lot of time is a process of unlearning, right? We unlearn
Yes.
people from skills that they already have or from skills that they already possess. They unteach that, or they break it out. You know what? I see this in you, but that's not the road I want you to go. So these are the skills that I'm going to enhance in you and
That's
teach
right.
you.
That's right.
Whereas it sounds like the way our ancestors moved communally, this is what we do as a family or as a group, and this is the trade or the skill that I'm going to teach you or pass down to you.
That's
So I
right.
think we have to ask ourselves, how many of the skills are we really teaching and passing down to our children?
That's right.
And I think like freedom for kids and choice for kids is a great thing. But how much autonomy are we giving kids that we're actually not passing them down specific knowledge and specific skills? So I think that also has to be identified when we're talking about trying to build this Black educator pipeline and trying to infuse that for youth.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. In fact, it's funny you say that, Shayna, because you really walking us through the role of education in a society where the members of that society treat each other as equal members of the society. That
Because
is not
we all
necessary.
have to be, well, we got to be responsible for each other.
That's
And I
right.
think sometimes when we talk about education, we talk about it as is a responsibility of somebody else to educate our child. But I think that
Yeah,
is indoctrination into American culture,
that's right.
and how, like, right, you have your kids, and I'm gonna send my kid to this school, and it's that teacher's job to do X, Y, and Z.
That's right. Which is actually a cultural extension of the way we used to do it without understanding or stopping to understand that that's not the society we live in anymore. So what you're raising is very important. Lisa Delpit many years ago wrote a book called Other People's Children,
Mm.
where she talks about this is what happens when Black and brown children enter a field of violence in terms of education. And one of our great Jegnas, another one of my great teachers, the great Asa Hilliard, used to say this. Often our children go to school and they're going to a fight, and they come home every day. How was school? It was a fight, Mom, but the parents can't hear that they're in there literally fighting for their lives, because you got teachers looking at them like, nah, I already picked out that you ain't gonna be nothing, or I got a career. The children screaming at the parents in a way, help, and but what we have in our minds is that we respect the teachers. See, people talk about, oh, Black people don't respect education. No, turning your child over to an educator and expecting them to educate your child is demonstration of the highest respect for education, because you have said this teacher is my representative in the classroom. But that is a flawed thinking in a society where we were brought into a field of white nationalist supremacist violence for one purpose and one purpose only: to work.
Yep.
Once we fought our way out of that, we took upon ourselves, along with some folks who, decided to help, but we were primarily responsible for this, of educating our children. And so what we've been struggling with since the end of legal segregation, desegregation, is understanding that the respect we had for teachers during its segregation, which was one of the foundational reasons that even segregated education in some ways did not have the cultural issues we're facing now, is that now we have turned our children over to teachers who do not share the assumption that our children are members of their society.
The society.
This is who you are, and I'm going to train you to the bottom because that's where I see you. And that's what y'all are literally destroying by creating and really recreating the pipeline. You're not creating a pipeline, you're recreating a pipeline. We had a pipeline. The people who killed Jim Crow, the lawyers, the doctors, the civil rights activists, go back and look at where they went to school. They went to black schools. Martin Luther King went to black schools all the way through.
You segue in right to my next thing that I wanted us to talk about, because pre-integration, right? It seemed like we had a pretty decent black teacher pipeline, right?
Well, so we didn't have resources, but we had the culture. No question. No question.
But saying that to say, we didn't necessarily have the resources, and resources meaning money, right? To buy the books or to get what we needed. But we had the soldiers on the ground, right? Yes. To execute. We had people teaching our kids. Our kids were still learning. Like, we still had those resources. And we had people who could make us something out of nothing or a way out of know-how, right? Like, that's what we had.
That's right.
So then my question then turns into like, and what I've been trying to explore is like, where was the breach in that pipeline? I think I know, but as the resident historian, I want you to tell the people.
you know what it was. You know what it is. I mean, well, let me say, there are a number of factors. None of us know completely what happened, but we certainly know some of the contributing factors. And this is a debate and discussion that I get into a lot, that you get into a lot, that we all hear a lot from those who are hardcore exponents of integration. And my first question, you're a teacher, I'm a teacher. The people who know so much about the value of education and how integrated education is so important, my first question to them is, before we get into the discussion of your data and your statistics, and are you a teacher? Well, no, why? Okay, it's almost then after that, it's like, well, no, why? I mute them.
I was like, mute.
No, I mute them. Yeah, I mute them. Why? Because I'm not saying that they don't have some very important points, and I'm not saying that we should go back to segregated education at all. But what I'm saying is, you have to understand the cultural significance of being in a classroom where not only does a teacher look like you, but she or he has an expectation for you that you believe and that you know you can reach, because they have content mastery, they can help you acquire it, and you're looking at an older version of yourself. Now, people in the integrated education is very important in terms of resources and exposing people to different perspectives. But let's be very clear. And you know this, you and I know this, what you all are doing with Freedom Schools, it just it warms my heart. And I'm grateful to still be a part of the conversation. And for those who might not know about how we do and have done Freedom Schools for so many years, we always read in books with these young people. Mm-hmm. And so we read W.B. Du Bois's The Education of Black People last summer during the pandemic. We read a book, The Lost Education of Horace Tate, over the arc of the fall. We're meeting every week. And so, you know, over the years, I've collected the histories of the Black Teachers Associations. Mm-hmm. And there are a number of them. Every state in the South had them. And actually the history of the American Teachers Association, which was the umbrella organization, this is Thelma Perry, who was actually the editor of the Negro History Bulletin for the Association for the Study of African American Life and History. This was published after the American Teachers Association, which is the Black Teachers Association, merged with the National Education Association, and NEA helped fund the publishing of these histories and subsidizing these histories. Parenthetically, people who want and need to help us understand, and this is a term of art from Ebonics, right, from African American English, mm-hmm. Get in where you fit in. In other words, what we don't need is people coming in the classroom saying, oh, you're doing it wrong, this is what you do. No, you get in where you fit in. You got some money? Okay, now you're going to come in the community and sit with grandma and them, who you might think don't know, but these are the people you start with in the community to find out what you, okay, if you're not going to do that, then we got something else you can do, but you get in where you fit in. Don't come in trying to lecture people. So anyway, what you see when you read these teachers' histories, two things. Number one, individuals don't beat institutions. That's why what you're doing and what y'all are doing at the center is so important. Center for Black Educator Development, what Bobby Elmecki is doing, what y'all are doing is so important. When you have institutions like we did pre-integration, if you're in charge, yeah, they're not giving you the funding. Yeah, you're not getting the new materials, but you have charge of the building. So
Mm-hmm.
a child, from the time she comes in the building to the time she leaves, is surrounded institutionally by these not only affirmations, but by high expectations that she's expected to meet. Did you have knuckleheads? For sure. Did you have trash teachers? For sure. But what you had was an institution that was able to see what's going on and surround those who needed to come up with those who knew how to do it.
Yeah.
When integration occurs, you have a decimation in the ranks of Black principals. You have Black master teachers that are cherry picked to go to some of the other places. And then what happens is these institutions, these Black schools, get backfilled with inexperienced folk, heavy-handed centralized administration. And this doesn't happen immediately in 1954 or 55. This is a long, steady arc of deterioration that occurs, so that here you are in 2021 with a decimated Black teaching force, not many Black, you've just given us the numbers, with hyper-segregated schools. I thought we were integrating. No, the schools are Blacker now than they were in 54. How is that possible? Because the only thing changed was the law, and then the sucking out of resources. And now you're looking at the children saying, and believe me, somebody watching this who's like, you thinking to yourself, but you never say this out of your mouth. We know what you say. I've been in too many of those administrations. I worked for at that time, the fifth largest school district in the country. I sat in the rooms. So I know these particularly Black women who ran the school district of Philadelphia, and all the people of goodwill, but then going in the community and you hear people say, funders, other people, these children, we have to help them because they have a culture of deficiency. Okay, what you're saying is my kid is trash. At this point, I'm really not listening to anything else you have to say because, and I'll say this very quickly. One of the questions I learned when I was working at the school district of Philadelphia, and I've never forgotten this, when people have all these incredible schemes about how to teach our children, my first question is, do you have children? If they say yes, I said, would you let your child do what you proposing to do
for them?
And if they say yes, then we can keep talking. If they say no, mute. Now, you get in where you fit in. You write the check and get out of our way. That's what you do.
One of my biggest fights when I was working within the institution of education was that very question. Do you have children? And would you allow someone to do this to your children?
Come on.
Or when you were doing this to your children, would you allow somebody to silence you until you have no power and no voice in advocating for your child? Right? Because that's one of the other biggest things that I feel like is absent from building a pipeline. Where is the parent voice?
Right.
Where are they? But for some reason, we feel like because like we're an institution, we know everything. Like parents are our first partners and they're the experts on their children. Right. Do they need help? Do they need resources? Yes, of course. But it's their child and they should be involved on decisions with their kids, which has to do with curriculum. So if you're going to be cutting out certain classes or treating their child like deficits or doing deficit curriculum, why wouldn't parents be informed about that and have a voice in that? So you make an excellent point when you say that was one of my hardest fights. Would you do this for your child?
No question.
Would the parents up and wherever allow this to happen for their child? No, because they'll be storming in here with a meeting with all types of stuff going on.
They'd have your job. And you from the Bronx, so you already know. And you in Philly, I lived in Philly for almost 20 years. Listen, the teachers who love our children, the community will fight for them to the wall.
No matter what. No matter what. Miss so told my grandma she ain't going nowhere, right?
That's
Miss so could not be graduating kids, whatever, but she a part of us. We love her. They will go down
for the teachers who, that's exactly right. And so what y'all are doing, you're really reconstructing that spirit. Here we are. It's Black History Month. Everybody wants to talk about all the Black people did all this wonderful stuff. And we had this conversation with our teenagers this summer in Freedom School. When we were, you look at the Little Rock 9, integration, Central High School. These young people come to integrate Little Rock High School, Central High School. The simple question opened up this whole conversation. Did they just start going to organized education? Did they just start going to school at 15, 16? No. Simple question. Where did they go before they got up that morning in their best shirts and ties and dresses and walked into a crowd of screaming white people with the National Guard around them? Did they go to school last year? Yeah. Where'd they go? And that opened up the conversation about Horace Mann High School in Central and the great Paul Laurence Dunbar High School of Central Arkansas. These parents, the teachers went to the parents and said, we'd like your child, because we looked at her grades, we looked at her extracurricular activities. We'd like her to be one of our representatives to integrate this white school. And they had to go to the parents. It was the parents and the teachers that busted down the doors of integration. And they did it by sending some of the best students of the segregated schools. But in American history, all we see is these magnificent, magical Negroes dropping down out the sky out of no institutions, integrating white schools. Like, no.
But that's the other point I want to make. So even those educators who bust down the door to push for integration to happen and pick those children, there's a misconception on why. Yes, they were picked to be representatives, right, to whites, so that they could understand who we really are and what we could accomplish. Somehow, though, that was erased. That was completely erased.
But you're rebuilding it.
Children pay from somewhere. I do understand that. These children were educated and being taught by great educators prior to this prominent white institution.
But you rebuilding it, though. I'm looking on y'all website. I'm looking on social media, and every day you dropping another educator, Fannie Jackson Coppin. I mean, I'm looking at the videos. Y'all are part of rebuilding this pipeline is reminding us that we don't need any help in knowing what to do. We need resources and get out of the way. It's very simple.
We already know what to do. We've come from a long line of history of people who have taught us what to do. We are living with blueprints and examples of things that have already been created, launched, and done. But we do need the resources.
Well, you need the resource. And in that city, I think about, of course, the great Connie Clayton. And I remember when Connie Clayton was superintendent, and then listening to her talk about the people that brought her in, the great Ruth Wright Hare. I mean, I'm listening. I mean, these are like these people say, well, how do we do? No, you're looking in the wrong direction. You're looking at each other into the future. You need to go right back, and you ain't got to go back 100, 200, 300. No, go back 50 years, go back 40 years. In fact, who is the senior Black teacher in your building? Or the ones that you know, can we get a meeting of them? Who are the community people who come? I mean, I look at somebody like Congressman Shaka Fattah. I remember I was working for school district when the first Gear Up grants were written. Mm-hmm. You can't, forget about whatever happened in Shaka Fattah's career, scandal. You don't get to be a Shaka Fattah without his mother. I mean, who is his mother? You look at Sharif El-Mekki. Who is his mother?
You don't get to Sharif El-Mekki without an Aisha. Okay,
you don't. Question. These are the master teachers, and there are men like Marcus.
A Shayna Tarell without a Vera Tarell. Like,
come on. You don't. And I'm sure from the time you step foot in a school, everybody knew you do not want that child going home and telling Vera Tarell that something went down in this building, because there won't be no building. You understand?
Well, mom would show up. She would pull up on you.
You got to do that. And our people now with this pandemic, especially, just trying to keep heaven and earth together, body and soul together. So when this is under these circumstances, but when this thing is over, it's probably going to be even worse. I got to work double shifts. So when a parent doesn't show up in a school, the judgment that people make about parents, no, those of us who are in the community, who are from the community, we know that just because a parent didn't show up, that's no indication of investment. In fact, there might be indication of investment because they're actually out there working another shift, or they got to do something else. We have to, and I think that's what y'all, in fact, I know that's what y'all doing. I'm watching y'all, and of course I participated and I see what's going on. You're taking these resources that people are putting in place, and you're turning around and you're literally inviting and then training people into that pipeline who want to be teachers, but the whole society has told them that's not a good job. But in their heart, they want to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. And that's why I say institutions are important. If you don't have institutions, if you don't have a Center for Black Educator Development, if you don't have a space, then that person's dream in their heart, not only are they not going to get encouragement, they will not get resources on what to do. They will not be surrounded with the resources to be able to pay them so they can do this work. And they'll never realize that finally when they get in that classroom and they say, this is what I knew this is what I wanted to do all along. They'll never have that literal pipeline. And that's what y'all doing. You're rebuilding the pipeline.
And to say it like even more plainly, so even as we were talking about the rituals of our ancestors, because of how society existed back then, having community and just having people supporting and mentoring you and investing in you, that just is how society was. That's just how people lived.
Our society, for sure. Right. That's right.
But But now
No.
we have to build an institution so that folks who do want to teach or don't even know that they have the capability to be phenomenal teachers, they don't have the mentorship. They don't have the support. They don't know how to intersect and get connected to network. So even now with the programming that we have with Freedom Schools,
Yes.
trying to connect kids and get them connected to those resources, trying to get college kids, Black college kids who are even in PWIs in schools of education to say, come here, teach with us. Teach your folks, get trained by your folks, get taught by your folks, right? So even trying to connect the dots of all those resources and trying to hone it into one place, because we don't have the community as we had in the past. So in rebuilding the Black educator pipeline, we have to rebuild community, and we have to find a centralized place where Black educators can feel like they are a part of a community. And it's a
That's right.
central community. So no matter if you're in Philadelphia, no matter if you're in California, no matter if you're in Arkansas, Colorado, no matter where you are, you want to build a place where people feel like they have a centralized community.
That's
So
right.
that is part of what we're trying to do with rebuilding that pipeline, which is why it was so important to point out, yeah, when we lived in ancient civilization in ancient times, you had access to your mentor because they were right there training you
Oh,
to be your replacement.
no
But
question.
living in your community today, I want to be a teacher. Where's the first place I'm supposed to go and look? So even
That's
if you
right.
say I go into my school, but if you're in a place like Pennsylvania and 50% of the schools don't have one Black teacher, where am I supposed to go to get my training and my mentorship?
You know,
How do I
Shayna,
do that?
what you just asked, I think you have lived the answer. And for those of you who were listening when Shayna Tarell introduced herself, you know, she mentioned the Harlem Children's Zone. When we started Freedom Schools with the School District of Philadelphia in 1999, we came into the Children's Defense Fund Network, and you all were one of the institutions that brought us in and trained us. And when we think of Jeffrey Kander, we think of Harlem Children's Zone, it's anchored around, and this is the model. This is the model we had. You take schools and you take community organizations. So if you want to be a teacher and you don't know what to go, it's like, do you know the community organization in your community? It could be the church. We were heavily with the churches. You know, it could be the Prince Hall Masons or the Order Eastern Star. It could be the Y. It could be the Police Athletic League. Whatever the institution you trust, we had to come in and we partnered a community-based organization, Women's Christian Alliance in North Philly,
Yep.
the Guild, with
Yep.
exactly with the neighborhood school. But we were only able to do that because the school district invested resources and wrote the check for 7 Freedom Schools in 1999, 14 Freedom Schools in 2000, 21 Freedom Schools in 2001. So the resources with the partnership meant finally that first, second, third wave, Nadira Suleiman, who of course is working with y'all now doing this work, Nadira was a high school student that the Black teacher in her school said she would be a good teenager to come in and work with y'all. Dana King was at Ben Franklin High School. She looked at Kevin White, said he would be a good student. So they came in and and many of them are teachers now because the teacher in the building partnered with the community-based organization, so was able to put them forward, and we had the resources to make it happen. You're like, I don't know, you're like the point guard in the sense that you got the rock and you see the whole floor, you see the whole play, and now you got to distribute the resources. All the rest of the players to make this run is the community-based organization, it's the school. So a student says, a person says, I want to be a teacher, but I don't know where to go. Listen, the center, you see that poster right there? You came to play ball. You see that call that number. I got you.
We need some shooting guards, need some bigs, need some forwards.
No question.
Come on down and get this game started.
Yes.
Exactly. But you raise an excellent point, because I know somebody had a question in the comments saying, like, if I don't have a school age child, how can I stand in the gap to support these efforts? And one of the major things is help us to recruit young people into this movement.
That's right.
Because another thing that you lifted up was with Kevin and Nadira, it was an educator who told them that they should be an educator.
No question.
So the thing with our young people is a lot of them have a sense of where to go, but we've all been teenagers. We know what that group think is like. We know what's hot right now. We know what we're competing against right now. Like social media is like the number one thing. We went through a wave of, and it's still there, athletes and celebrity stuff, right? But now the new thing is like, I want to be on YouTube. I want to be a YouTube or a TikTok sensation,
My
right?
God.
Right.
My
But again,
God.
this is young people, right?
Sure.
I think when we become to get elders, we be like, shame on you. But we was young. So think about what you wanted to be
We
back in the
was
day.
young.
That was just absolutely ridiculous, right? Like,
We was
couldn't
young.
tell me and my girlfriends, we wasn't going to start a dance group and go on Showtime on Apollo, right? Like,
Sure.
that was that was our thought process. But
So
one
what
of the
drove
things
what brought you to the Freedom School at the Zone? How did you get there?
I had, well, so one of the things you're talking about community,
Yeah.
my family is a very tight knit community, right?
Okay.
So I have
Okay.
3 older sisters. 2 of my older sisters are in education. My oldest sister is a principal, and then my second oldest sister worked at Harlem Children's Zone. She worked at Harlem Children's Zone when it was Reedland, right? So when Jefferson Canada was
Ah,
all the way on the ground.
yes,
And
yes.
she used to bring me to work with her because she was, in charge of the programs. So she used to bring me to work with her. She said, let me engage with the kids that were there. And
Y'all
then
hear this?
when I got of age, she said, like, hey, you're going to work here, right? You want a job? You can work here. So then I
Th-
started to work for Harlem Children's Zone.
there it
Now, my
is.
sister was also one of the first elevator trainers when
Yes.
they
Oh, I
started doing
remember.
it.
No question.
So Erica Terrell. So, and my
Oh,
oldest
no
sister is
question.
Ava Terrell. So
She came down. Erica, look, she and Erica Asakoye, she used to call on them. They came down and trained the Philadelphia Freedom School students.
yes,
Yes.
they all know each other.
No
But
question.
with that connection, me as a young person, I had adults in my life who were
Yes.
like, again, as we talk about our ancestors and traditions, hey, this is what we do. So,
Yes.
like, this is what you're going to be about. Like, you can still make your own choices, but I'm going to introduce you to this. Like, I'm going to introduce you to a movement. And I also come from the history of social justice, right? My parents are from Georgia. They both marched with Dr. King. So, like, that
Yes.
is like in my blood. And I'm just
Yes.
one of those people who were fortunate to have that teaching, to have that training, and to have that indoctrination in that way. Especially like with my older sister, her education was like, she was really smart. She was one of the exceptional folks. So she had to go to school. She went to private school, which means most of her educational life was spent around white folks. But that sparked something in her to fight for social justice. That really
Mm.
sparked something in her to say, like, hey, I want you to know. She's come home to me. I was like 5 all the time. You are pro-black, and don't nobody tell you racist, okay? You are pro-black.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
like, okay. But saying all of that to say, it took people in my life to tell me, like, these are the opportunities that are afforded to you.
No
And
question.
as you can see, I'm loud and I'm opinionated. So
No,
I,
but well educated, and that's the culture. You don't know anything but what you're doing. So you took all your gifts and they shaped you. I mean, children is so funny. People, people talk about slavery and they say, well, slavery existed all over the world. And so then we get into the discussion of chattel slavery. No, it wasn't chattel slavery. They went, but either way, I always make the point, and I tell students, I say, we've all been involved in an unfree labor system in our lives. And people say,
Mhm.
what do you mean? I said, were you a child? Yes. Did you do something you didn't want to do, but you were told to do? Yes. Then that's unfree labor system. You don't ask children, what you ask them what you want to do, but no, you're going to school and
Yes.
you're gonna sit here and then a child will begin to find. In fact, I remember this very interesting. One of the things we loved about the fact that in Philadelphia is, we have all these black and brown folk, all these non-white folk. We got poor white folk. We got everybody there, cheek to jowl, and have
Yep.
a lot of challenges. But we had a couple of freedom schools, Julia de Burgos, Roberto Clemente, and the community-based organization was the great Congreso de Latinos Unidos, right? Congreso.
Mhm.
And so what you
Yes.
don't do, you
In
don't
the
go
fight.
into the Badlands. You don't go into North Philly and tell people what. No, you go in and say, look, we done opened up this school. Let's bring everybody in. And what you find is parents know how to parent.
Yes.
So the students may come the first day and they be like, oh, I don't know. Shoot. Within a week, they crying because can free school go more than 6 weeks? But the child
All
didn't
the
know
time.
until she got there. You know what I'm saying? But once she
All the
get there,
time.
I'm good. You know what I'm saying? So you don't just and see, this is one of the things I think, unfortunately, we have picked up as a bad habit from these other societies. And it has everything to do with class. When you start talking about folks who were in quote unquote upper class, yeah, you can have your child do whatever the hell, because they're going to inherit the reins of the society.
Yes.
Our children can't do what your children do In an ideal world, that would be great. But in the world we doing right now, we got to get our children in a rhythm of learning. And so that every child finally who is not as fortunate as you were,
Mm-hmm.
when somebody says, I don't have school age children, how can I get involved? You could be that adult who's in the space when that child who is somebody else's child comes in. Because I'm sure everybody at Harlem Children's Zone did not have children. So when you were a little girl, you're also being trained by adults who said, you're my child while you in this building.
Mm-hmm.
and that everybody can get involved. You get in where you fit in.
Yes, definitely get in where you fit in.
Yeah.
But again, we keep honing on, like, I feel like some really dynamic points about like who you are and who you should be within a community.
Yes.
And like somebody else asked the question just about how do you hold the districts or your districts accountable for retention of Black and brown teachers, right? And I think that one of the ways that you do that, and it depends on where you sit and what level that you are in, but it's not necessarily about holding the district accountable. It's really making sure that Black and brown teachers have the support, the mentorship, and the resources to stay in a profession, because that's the research, and that's what we hear from them. Most leave within 2 years because they felt like they had no support. So it's really how you're fortifying, supporting, and it's understanding too, right? Black and brown folks need a different type of support and a different type of mentorship. And that's a whole nother show for me to go into, like what accountability looks like to Black and brown teachers versus to what it looks like.
Well, y'all spread the word. Y'all spread the word, because I know you're gonna do that show. And of course, as we know, you grow your first of all, you got to be involved politically, city council, everybody, ward leaders, everybody, and you grow that support by involving people. I distinctly remember Helen Jim, for example. Helen Jim was a very important member of Asian Americans United. This is 20 some years ago. She was involved with Freedom Schools from jump. This is when Debbie Way was working for the school district and over Asian American curriculum for the school district of Philadelphia. And we had a Freedom School in South Philly. We were at Bot, we were Palumbo, and Helen Jim was not a city councilwoman at the time. But she was
you know whose Freedom Schools that was, right? That's when I worked for United Communities in Southeast.
United Communities Southeast, no question. So you know this story better than I do, no question. And so fast forward to 2021, we got Helen Gim. We got a young brother who was a junior out there at Frankfurt High School, who's now on the city council, Isaiah Thomas, Councilman Isaiah Thomas. He was a Freedom School student. So, but now in terms of accountability, ain't nothing gonna get past them because they know what it is. If you want to get involved, you got to push these politicians, and you got to put people in office who know the stuff from the inside. And that takes us to the days of Roxanne Jones, Anthony Williams, takes us back to Dave Richardson, who was a student activist. I mean, we've done it before. We know what to do.
And we need people who are not only going to be a voice, but we need people who are going to appropriately allocate the resources needed to make these things happen, right? Which is why it's so important to put people in the right spaces and have your power in the right places, right? And again, even when we say build the Black educator pipeline, like at the center, we focus heavily on teachers, but we also will be growing and talking about what administration and leadership and school leadership looks like, because we all know, right? People don't necessarily leave schools, right? They leave principals, right? they leave leaders, right? Like, I love these kids, but I ain't about to do this, right?
Oh
like,
my gosh,
I'm out.
So, oh my gosh.
Even equipping people with the resources, again, to be able to appropriately support Black and brown educators so that we can then follow on that return and support Black and brown children. That's why our 444 pipeline is so important. Because if we training you from high school all the way through college, always there 4 years, like you have the skills necessary then to make that return, and you know what to do when you get in front of children. But same vein, if you want to elevate your leadership, right? Because being a teacher is the floor. So being education, right? Sometimes there is no ceiling. But if you've had this training and you've been a part of this community, you're making decisions in the right frame of mind. You're indoctrinated in the right kind of pedagogy, the right kind of training, and the right kind of support.
That's right.
But when you have folks that you have for 4 years, so you have somebody like Isaiah, who Freedom Schools had a hold on since high school, right? Yeah. Who knows a lot of ways what needs to happen in a lot of spaces and how he can advocate for the right things for Black and brown children.
Shayna, you have made, man, you said a whole lot right there. That is so true. No, because I'm thinking about, I mean, like you said, teachers for sure,
Mm-hmm.
principals for absolute sure. I mean, we're fortunate enough to have, you know, a lot of the work we were doing with Fruit Schools, for example, was connected to some of that generation of great. I remember Florence Johnson at University City, John Chapman at Ben Franklin. I'm thinking about, you know, Miss Young, who was over at Overbrook for a while because she left University City, came over, took over. I mean, you had principals in place, and I'm just naming several that come to mind, who the teachers in the building trusted, who knew the students. And so, like you said, once you get buy-in from administration, which is again why another reason what y'all are doing is so important, you understand the educator pipeline from student all the way through the teachers to the administrators in the building to the districts to the stakeholders. You have to understand the whole thing if you're sitting where you're sitting, because you, in order to build a pipeline, you got to know what a pipeline does, where it begins, where it ends, what it empties into, and you can't really undervalue or understate the importance of those administrators. So you said, man, sis, you see, that's why this center is so important, because it not only serves as a kind of on the ground thing to secure resources. And I saw a couple of people in the chat who were saying here on screen, yes, you got to have resources so that, you know, student teachers support this kind of thing. But also the center doubles as a think tank, because you got some of the best minds in one place with a single objective. Sometimes it takes getting the people in the room to talk. Mm-hmm. And when that happens now, when somebody like I remember Johnny Irizarry, for example. Johnny Irizarry did Latino studies for the school district curriculum. He ended up on the school reform commission. And when we go in the meeting and you see Johnny sitting there, you realize, okay, we're gonna have a victory today. Why? Because this cat he knows and before that, he was at Talia Puerto Riqueño over there next near Congreso or down right there on Erie. So it's like, okay. But you got to have an institution like the center where you have those people in one place and you get in the room, and at the end of a brainstorming session, you got the whole thing mapped out. And then it's like, break, let's go out here and make this thing happen.
Let's make it happen. But yes. I think a lot of what we talked about today, especially what you said, and to leave our people with just Black Educator Pipeline, building it in the spirit of Black History Month, we have to get back to community. To get back to community. Like, we're building formative institutions now because of the lack of community.
That's right.
Everybody's off in their silos and we're so separate, and we don't have aligned visions or aligned goals as a people, right? We just out here trying to live and survive. And as weird as this may sound, but like, you know, capture that American dream, right? Like that's the aligned goal. But what our ancestors were aligned on, they were aligned on survival too, but freedom, right? So
freedom.
Where everybody's common goal was freedom and liberation, you just move differently. And I think sometimes we lose sight of what freedom and liberation means in our current context, in our current day. So no question. What I think about now is like, society is like a virus, right? It morphs, it changes.
It's true.
And we are fighting every time to find the next cure for how society is going to morph and change, right? So my hope is that the center could be that beacon of light, and the center could be one of the cures, right? To alleviate the lack of educator support, and to alleviate what's happening to Black and brown children in our public schools.
That's right. Well, it already is. You're just getting better. You're getting better and better and bigger and stronger. And those of you, if this is your first introduction to this conversation, y'all tune in regularly to Shayna and listen and get connected seriously, because this train is moving and we all are in this. And as Curtis Mayfield said, if it's hell below, we all gonna go. So at the end of the day, if you think you're not involved in this, trust, whether you recognize it or not, we are all in this together. So, so how regularly are you going to have this platform to help people understand what needs to be done and how to do it?
We will be on here every Thursday at 12 with different topics. So when I text you, brother, text me, I'm gonna need your help, need guests, all this other stuff, but we'll be on that. And I mean, the people are requesting, so Baba, depending on your schedule, I probably will try to have you on more regularly.
I'm good. I teach 8 o'clock class, and then I have a regular standing meeting, but this hour I just keep clear, because I don't go
Yeah.
back to class for another. And now, of course, with this damn plague, we all sitting in place. So I'm teaching from right here in the library. So therefore, I should be good.
Yes. So I'm definitely gonna like work to get you in more regularly. But
Okay.
we'll be here every Thursday at 12 March. We're gonna try, it's gonna be Women's Month. So we're gonna really try to focus on some phenomenal women in education. So when you get off this phone, you better text me.
I
Okay.
got you. Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we
Oh,
really want to
yeah.
focus on phenomenal women in education because we need their voice definitely on how we are going to work to really build
No
the
question.
Black
Well,
Educator
we
pipeline.
got the anchor, phenomenal woman in education, leading the discourse. So March already, you got you at the seat. That's 12 months a
Listen,
year. So I mean, you know,
I am humbled by this opportunity, and I'm just grateful because all I really want to do right now is like educate people and expose people to this. Like that is my mission. So I'm grateful for this platform. I'm grateful to be able to connect educators and build a space where their voices will be elevated and lifted.
yes,
That's really what I'm interested in. Well,
yes.
Baba,
Well,
we are going
I know
to.
you got to go. I know it's 1 o'clock, but I want to mention this right quick.
Uh-huh.
That is one of the great elements of a master teacher, the humility, to know the thing, to understand that I'm playing my role as part of a larger thing. So I just want to say thank you for inviting me into this initial conversation. I'm so excited. And if y'all can feel that enthusiasm coming from me and coming from this sister right here, y'all spread the word and be here next Thursday at noon Eastern Standard Time, because this is where the thing is going to go down. So I appreciate you.
Yes.
I
I
love you.
appreciate you, folks. If you are out there and you like this video, please
Oh yeah,
please
y'all like
share,
the video.
like it and pass it and share it, please. We appreciate you. I most definitely appreciate you tuning in with us today for building the Black Educator Pipeline. We'll see you again next Thursday at 12. Look out for the advertisements for our next guest. Again, we thank you